Okay, so week 4, day 1. What did we do last week? What did we learn? Where were the light bulb moments? Where were the frustrations? What clicked? All of that good stuff. Anything from last week?
We started on our Netflix website page. Yeah.
Yep. Did basic project setup there. We're going to dive into that more this week. What else did we do last week?
We finished up our mobile website.
Yep, so we did some work on Syracuse.com, understanding what it's like to design for smaller screens, getting more practice with our divs, and making sure our nested tags are lining up, and all of that good stuff. What else did we do last week?
Use some dev tools to inspect certain parts of our HTML and CSS.
Absolutely, yep. Dev tools are always interesting to teach because, sometimes teaching how to use a tool, you just have to use it, right? And so I think you'll see dev tools popping up again and again as we start doing more back-end development and understanding how our CSS is applying and all of that good stuff. So dev tools was a good one. Any light bulb moments last week? Anything that really clicked that, like is obvious now but wasn't obvious when we learned it? Anything kind of making more sense or you're feeling more confident in than you were at the beginning of the program?
Um, when it comes to the classes and the IDs, I kind of have a better understanding of them, I think.
Awesome. Yep. And CSS is not going to go away. So glad that you got that understanding. We've got kind of 2 weeks left of HTML and CSS land. We've got this week, which we're going to spend working on the Netflix site. And then next week is a project week. So we do a change of pace there. We don't do any new concepts. All we're focusing on is getting our portfolio site set up and then also starting work on an e-commerce site, which is going to be an ongoing project that we keep coming back to almost every project week, and get deploying, get working on backend stuff there, get working on the database, layering that in. But in order to get all of that to work, we can start with our HTML and CSS and getting all of that set up. But this week is all about Netflix. So any questions from the weekend? Any questions from the homework? Anything outstanding before we dive back into a couple tasks before we get going on Netflix?
I wasn't at office hours, but I watched some of the video, and the part where you were talking about semantic HTML. Are we going to get into that at all in terms of applying it? Or is it good just to read up on it and do some free code camp?
Good to read up on it, do some free code camp. There's an entire, I think they called it applied accessibility in free code camp. That module is a good one to complete. We do have an accessibility expert that I need to reach out to see if we can have them in as a guest speaker. We won't be going too far into it because the concepts tend to be pretty easy to apply. Basically, all that we're doing is instead of using divs, we're using some semantic tags like articles or header or nav or something like that. So it isn't hard to apply conceptually, but just thinking kind of through how someone with a disability may be using your site is why that accessibility matters. We won't be going too far into that. If I think of it, though, as I'm working on some code, I will try and pepper in some semantic tags that we would use there, but we won't be going too far into that in the normal curriculum. But I would encourage, Free Code Camp has probably 10 to 25 exercises in there, and it's just a good thing to run through quickly. If you want, it's up. If you've got the free time and the capacity, it's probably worth getting your certification through Free Code Camp, because that is a great thing to have on your resume, is that responsive web design certification. And there's actually a couple assignments on Free Code Camp tonight that are due tomorrow, and then we will layer those concepts into the Netflix site this week. Any other questions? Okay. So before we dive in, the outline for today's class, we are going to spend some time kind of reviewing Trello from the perspective of using it personally, right? Using Trello not just for project management, but kind of managing your own personal time. So we're going to go through an example project and talk about the things listed on those sub-bullets there on the outline. And then we're going to kind of split apart. I'm going to go off into a little room, a breakout room, and I'm going to go through gridding out our Netflix site and then also doing an outline using that grid. So if you're kind of looking at Netflix and you're like, I don't know where to start, like this is a huge project. Yes, we've got our files started, but where do we go next? You're welcome to come into the breakout room with me. We'll move you guys into there and do this exercise, right? Where we not only draw all of the boxes, but then we go through and do a text-based outline. And that text-based outline sometimes is a good stepping stone into actually getting into our code and kind of breaking down that engineering process. However, for the rest of class, I will be in the main room and I'm just going to be answering questions, right? And so the goal with this assignment is that you start applying everything. So if you would like to, you can work in a group of up to 3 people, but it's also totally fine to work with yourself or work on yourself. Work on this yourself. That's what I was trying to say. There we go, Max. On getting this Netflix project done, right? And it's really just a matter of starting at the top and working our way down. And as things pop up, the goal of definitely this class and probably also tomorrow's class is going to just be knocking out the Netflix site and making improvements. Everyone's going to be going at a different pace, and that's okay. I will say that the Netflix site is created in Canvas as a homework assignment. That is not due until Sunday. There is 4 exercises I'd like you guys to go through on Free Code Camp by tomorrow's class. That should only take you 10 or 15 minutes to do, but I've got that linked in Canvas and the daily outline as assignment 21. And then I've got a bunch of different resources for you guys. So the mock-up that we're going off of, that we're recreating everything. I've got images for all the different show tiles and the logos. If you would like to make your own logo, I've got that linked in the resources. And I also have the HTML and CSS starter files where we left them off from Thursday's class. So those are all available to you. I believe I've made them all publicly accessible. If you can't get to them, let me know. But you should be able to pick up where we left off on Thursday. And if you don't have the code from Thursday, that is the last link in there, along with the second link to download all the images. With that said, I know some of you guys were making awesome progress already on your Netflix site. If you end up flying through this and you say, I'm done, where do I go next? There are 3 optional things you can go from there. There are Flexbox exercises in Free Code Camp. I would recommend doing those. Those are going to help you understand the little things that we ran into, like, hey, the account profile isn't lining up with the subscribe button. Well, Flexbox would help you move that around and get that into the right position. So I recommend doing the Free Code Camp exercises on Flexbox. And then there is a little game called Flexbox Froggy, where you practice moving a frog around on lily pads and trying to get everything to line up. And then the last thing is CSS Grid. CSS Grid is kind of a more advanced version of the Bootstrap grid. It's not necessary that you learn it, but it does give you even a level up on Flexbox in terms of laying things out and getting things exactly the way you want. So those are optional next steps. We only want to get to those if we are done with the Netflix project, right? But the next day, once we get through the Trello board, I'm just going to go over some quick tips for you guys. Want to plant the seed in your head for any questions. If you find like you're struggling with time management or you're struggling with keeping track of everything in the class, kind of keep that in the back of your head for what we're about to go over. And then if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we're just going to roll forward with the Netflix grid and outline and all of that stuff. Any questions on that before we continue? Okay, with all of that said, before we dive into Trello, I'd like to introduce Ariel and just give her a chance to say hi. She is our TA for this week and will be back for several other weeks in the program. She is also a graduate of Cohort 2. So just want to open the floor. I know she introduced herself last week, but just want to give you a chance to say anything.
Hi guys, I'm not doing home renovation this week, so it probably makes a little bit more sense. And as much as Max said, couple weeks, if I could take the program 18 times, I would, and he won't let me, which is why I'm trying to TA now. I took so much from this program that you have to utilize it. The biggest thing was time management, and probably, honestly, the best thing I could tell you to do is utilize those one-on-ones, because everybody has something different, and it doesn't have to be just with Max. There's other instructors you can hit. There's other TAs to hit. I found some TAs did better explaining JavaScript to me than the way I was understanding it from that instructor. If you have a better way of learning like real world concepts, like, you know, any type of analogy that's like cooking or something like that, and you're not grasping it, please reach out to somebody, because I can guarantee they can understand it. That was my biggest thing. Some people did better with the logic side of it. There's always somebody to help. And I cannot stress enough to reach out. If you don't understand, stop, cut Max off. He's not going to freak out. I do it to him all the time. Ask somebody or message me.
Okay, that's enough. Next, let's keep going. Just kidding. Go ahead.
I came back for another cohort, so he's not that bad. The other thing I wanted to point out is if you go to get help from a TA or an instructor, learn to utilize some of the buttons in Slack. Like there's code blocks, so you can send over your files or send over your GitHubs. It gets easier as you go on. It's easier if we can't get with you with a time schedule or something, send that over. Somebody will take a look. There's always somebody there that can take a look. Even if you send a code, it might be 10 p.m. Like I'm normally up until really late and I'm up really early. So I might not catch you at 9 p.m., but I can catch you at 3 a.m. and I'll send it for 8 a.m. for you. Time management, whatever schedule works for you, stick to it. Put it in your phone and get it done as best you can, because right now easy breezy is great, but come JavaScript, React, I had a hard time with Heroku personally. And some of the DevOps, you're going to want to save that time and be glad you scheduled it later. So that's it. That's all I can offer you. And, you know, hit me up on Slack if you need to.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that of this time management is not just going to be helpful for you going through this boot camp. It's also going to be helpful once you get into the workforce, right? Because I am amazed at how much of my day is in meetings and just hopping from meeting to meeting, and then I get outside of the meetings, right? And I've got a 2-hour block, and I'm like, I'm brain dead because I've been communicating all day and coordinating with the team and figuring out what's next and working with different departments. And then it's like, oh, I still have some code features that I need to get out, right? And so without breaking up my day and really having that time segmented out to make sure, hey, this is when I'm going to be writing my code or shipping features or collaborating with another developer or whatever it is, it's very, very easy to forget to have that time for yourself, right? And so same goes. You guys are all juggling a lot, whether it's a full-time job or a family or just getting through this program. You know, there's a lot going on. And so setting out your time for that. And what I have often found is that setting out the time is not the hard part. It's knowing how you can spend the time, right? And so we're actually going to dive into just an example Trello project here. I just want to touch on a couple things here. So First things first, setting due dates and reminders. So this is more of a personal Trello board, right? So we did our portfolio site Trello board, and that was great for tracking a project. But sometimes it's more helpful to have an additional Trello board just tracking, hey, where am I at as a student, right? So the first thing is maybe I didn't finish up the new site, right? I was in the middle of it. I was working on it over the weekend. I missed the deadline for it. First thing I can recommend is setting a due date. So once you add a card and pop it open, over here on the right, there's a dates option, and you can set for whenever it's due, but also set up a due date reminder. And what that does is it will send you an email close to the due date, and will also send you a push notification if you have the Trello app installed. Just a reminder of, hey, you said you were going to have it done by this time. This may be a good reminder for you of what you're working on. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is use a checklist. So over on this Netflix site, it's very easy to get overwhelmed, right? And think of all the different things we need to get done on Netflix. So what I did is I came over here and hit this checklist button and hit add, and that just added this list going on here, right? And so sometimes you don't want to have 40 different cards because it's hard to keep track of all of them and move them around, but you may want to just jot some ideas down to yourself, right? And so you're going to start with what the approach we're going to take in class tonight is, hey, get the visual done, draw the boxes, get the outline done, get the header done, move from the top of the page down to the bottom. The reason why it's important to do this is because as you finish these, there is actually a physiological reaction to checking something off and getting something crossed off a to-do list. So that's reason one, is you actually feel better when you're doing proper project management. Reason two is because chances are you're not going to finish all of these in a day, right? I don't think I could finish all of these in a day. So why it's important is when you come back to this tomorrow and you go, okay, where did I leave off? What div was I in? Where was I stuck? You can come in and actually see, oh, you know what? I got the first 3 done and I was working on the main section. So if you close this card, it will actually say 3 of 7 complete. And then when we click into it, it's going to show things checked off there. So those checklists I find super helpful. And what becomes a card is whatever makes sense to you, right? So assignments are the easiest thing where you're saying, all right, I've got to stay on top of all of them. As I see them in the daily outlines, maybe I'll create cards for myself and track them over there. But the other thing that cards are great at is they can track different resources, right? So I can just go into this description and jot down a quick note of, you know, this is the example site I was thinking of. Right, and I can save that, and now my link is in here. Or maybe I've got a screenshot where I'm thinking I don't want to forget about the portfolio site, but at the same time, I'm not working on it this week. I'm not getting to it to next week. So I created this card in my backlog and was able to just throw a screenshot onto there or have a central place where I can just dump those resources. So when I come back to it, I'm not scrolling through my Canvas assignments and finding what I submitted or, you know, trying to find my wireframes. Maybe it would be helpful to drop the draw.io file in here, right? It can be a great place to kind of organize yourself and go, everything for the portfolio, I'm going to drop in here. The other thing I wanted to say is order really matters, because when you're looking at this, you're going to have a long list of things and feel like it's overwhelming, right? So just by ordering these and saying, you know what, the mobile news site I'm in the middle of, I've got to get that done first. And as soon as I do, I'm going to move it over to done. And then I'm going to look at the top kind of 2 or 3 things in my homework and say, oh, well, you know what, this is, you know, this we did in class, but this one I know is due tomorrow. So let me go in and let me put a due date on there for tomorrow and just give myself a reminder an hour before just to make sure I get that done before class. And then I'm going to move that into doing, and I'm going to go in and tackle that right now. So it's those little tools that it seems silly to be tracking all of that. But as this program goes on, there are going to be more and more resources that are getting thrown at you. And using a tool like this, it's just going to make it easier to not feel overwhelmed when you do sit down for homework time, right? Being able to track all of it. So order definitely matters. Make sure that you're dragging things around and making sure that the top of the list is actually your top priority, because that's what will make it not overwhelming when you come back into it. And then the last thing I will say on this is leave notes for yourself. You know how exhausted you are at the end of the night, and when you come back tomorrow, you're like, all I remember is the exhaustion from last night. Where was I? Right? So it's helpful to come in here and at the end of the night, before you sign off, right before you shut down, do a 10-minute decompression, right? Just leave yourself a note of, finally got through the nav bar, still need to get my image to be full width, haven't even started on the movie rows yet. Something as simple as that, right? If you think through that and then go look at our mock-up, you would know exactly where you left off, right? You would go, all right, I have got that visually. I know I need to still get this done, but I'm just leaving a note for myself so that when I come back to this tomorrow, I don't hate last night's version of me, right? I know exactly where I was at, and even though I was exhausted, even though it was time for me to be done, at least I have notes coming back. And these little things may seem very silly to you, but I can tell you this is how I juggle 2.5 jobs right now, right? Is leaving myself these notes, making sure that I've got everything captured so that when I do dive in the next day, I'm able to track all of it and stay on top of all of it. So Trello has a ton of features, and I know it takes a little while to get used to, and we don't require you to use this tool, but as we get started on your capstone project, you're going to have more things that you're trying to keep track of. As we go into JavaScript, you're going to have additional resources that you can go into and practice with, and so while the daily outlines are great at keeping me sane, my point of staying on top of all of my projects would live in Trello, right? And so daily outlines are great. And if you tend to be an outline person, you can create Google Docs. Like, that's completely fine. But Trello is just the tool I would recommend. Any questions on that? Do you feel like that is a little bit helpful in terms of tracking resources, or kind of seeing this from not necessarily the project perspective, but the personal organization perspective?
Yeah, I have a question. It seems really useful to me. Personal organization is an ongoing challenge of mine. With Trello, so when does an assignment merit a card? When does it merit its own board?
Yeah, so normally you want to, if it is going to be a several day project, or normally even longer than that, it gets its own board. Right? When you want to say, hey, I'm working on my capstone. My capstone is going to be worked on throughout the full 6-month boot camp. I want to keep that in a separate board so that when I say, where's my capstone progress at, I can go to my capstone progress and only see my capstone. There aren't going to be homework assignments mixed in with it. There aren't going to be, resources that I'm trying to keep track of. I'm just going to have a clear vision of my capstone board. But for something like the Netflix assignment, you may say, you know what, I'm just going to do one card for that, or a couple cards on that for my general project management, personal tracking, right? So that's going to be more of a, hey, let me just have my 1,000-foot view. This is going to be my dashboard for the day, right? Where I can come into this and see what I'm working on, get access to my resources right away, and dive in there. So that's the separation I would do. And it's completely okay to say, hey, I'm going to create my capstone Trello board, and I'm going to track everything over there. But then I'm going to go to my personal board and say, I'm going to leave another card in there that says, go look at this card in the capstone, right? Because this is something that I need to get done today. Or, hey, I need to, have a couple hours of capstone progress a day. Let me put that in my personal board, and then I'm going to jump into the capstone board, and that's where I'm going to be tracking everything for that project in particular. So it really depends. Now you may say, I don't want separate boards. I want to just track everything on one big board, and that's what's going to make the most sense to me. And that's also okay. The line between board, card, and checklist task item is hard to define. But normally what I recommend is that you do a task is something that you're like, hey, let me just lay out the steps. Let me say 1, 2, 3, this is how I'm going to solve this overall project or task or whatever it may be. The task or the card tends to be something that you can get done in a day or a couple day period. You don't want tasks to be too big. And then the board is kind of that ongoing project level of, hey, this has so many moving pieces and I'm going to get roadblocked on things. Let me create a separate board for that if I want the visibility into this project without getting caught up in my homework assignments and all the other things that I may try and use Trello for. The other thing I will say is, just because Trello by default kind of pushes the Kanban system, which is the to-do, doing, done, it may make more sense to have a different card list for each week, right? And based off of that, as you find that there are concepts that are making sense to you, you could just create a new card for that, right? So you could say Bootstrap. You could create a week 3 list of cards, create one called Bootstrap, and just drop your Bootstrap notes in there. And that way, when we come back to Bootstrap in the vanilla JavaScript module, and you're like, I know we did Bootstrap stuff, and I got resources, and I dumped some notes in there for that, you can go right back to the week 3 list, see that you've got a card for Bootstrap, pop that open, and have access to resources there. So there are lots of different ways you can use Trello. You could use Trello as, you could create a board for resources, right? And break it down by week or break it down by concept and say, this is going to be my front-end dev list, and I'm going to put all of those concepts in there. So it really depends how you want to use it. You may find that Trello is a great tool for your resources, but a terrible tool for keeping you going, right? Some people find Trello is a little bit overwhelming, and they would do better with just a to-do list app. AnyDo is one that I know Karen likes. The to-do list or the reminders app built into your phone may be fine. It really is about finding what works for you. But staying on top of that now is going to set you up so well for when you get into the workforce and they are using a project management tool. So you can not only say, hey, how do I understand what tasks are coming my way and making sure the team is tracking my progress, but at the same time, what system works for me? How do I stay on top of all of these things, right? I know when I get overwhelmed, I chuck Trello out the window, I pull out a spiral bound notebook, and I just start writing notes. Because when I'm overwhelmed and things are getting thrown at me and I need to make sure that things don't fall off my radar, I pull out my notebook and I start jotting things down. And that's where I start my day every morning, is going through, prioritizing that list, figuring out what's remaining, and going from there. So I think Trello is a great tool because it allows for collaboration and it allows you to do so many different things on the cards in terms of checklists and due dates and reminders and all of that stuff. But like Ariel said, is sometimes Google Docs is the better solution, right? Of like, just give me bullet points and I just want to jot things down. Or, maybe a to-do list works better for you. And at that point, you can handwrite it. You can use another to-do list app. You can use one you may already be using, whatever works for you. We like to teach Trello, though, because it's so flexible, but sometimes that flexibility is too open-ended for someone, and they need a little bit more of a confined system, at which point the to-do list apps may be a better fit for you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It's definitely a lot to think about, and that's why I kind of wanted to show this example on of understanding, like, hey, it may not necessarily be a task that we're putting into Trello, right? The thing we may be putting into Trello is like, here's everything I've got on my portfolio site. So let me drop in resources, like these are not the next steps forward on this project. It's just saying I'm going to dump everything into here, so when we do come back to the portfolio site, we've got a central repository for that information. Any other questions? Any systems that have worked for you guys that you care to share? Doesn't have to be one that you've learned in the class, but anything that, you know, we're going into week 4 on, anything that you found personally is working for you.
I currently use Asana. I use it at work, and I use it for my personal self. So that's a good one too. It's really close. Okay, one second. It's really close to like Trello, but it has other features.
Yeah, and there are a lot of tools that project management is a very broad category, right? So Asana tends to be one of the more closer or direct competitors to Trello. But there are a lot of great tools out there. So if you find that you're still struggling with time management or project management, and you like the idea of Trello, but you're finding it's not quite the perfect fit for you, definitely go out and check out other tools like Asana, you know, like to-do list apps, and try and figure out if something like that works better for you. Any other notes or any other personal successes from you guys?
No, thanks for sharing about the Trello.
No problem.
I
Okay.
definitely will use it.
Yeah, and this may seem like overkill. It may seem like I hate the phrase beating a dead horse, but I don't know what the other phrase is there. But it may seem like we're covering this too much now. But as the class picks up and as we get going into JavaScript, and you know, think about all of those feelings where you were in week 2, where you're like, I don't get this. Like, I don't get the divs. I understand his code does it. My code isn't like that. I'm just struggling with that, right? And so having a system like this in place for saying, all right, I'm coming back into this another day here. What's it going to take for me to understand this? That's a thing that you're going to be asking yourself over and over again throughout this program as we start new modules and learn new topics, right? And so to Ariel's point earlier, that's where your one-on-ones are going to be most helpful. Communicating to me, hey, these are the concepts that I'm not getting. Here's where I zoned out in class because I just lost it. Like, whatever it is, that's how to best utilize your one-on-one. So I know right now our one-on-ones may not have been particularly technical, but you will get to the point where our one-on-ones are just screen sharing and you've got your code pulled up and you're like, why isn't this working? Or can you review this for me and tell me what next steps are? Or you said this word during class and I have no idea what that means. Can you talk about that? And so we will get to that point, but keeping track of all of that and having the system in place so that you can jot down those notes and you can remember, hey, I forgot, you know, you said this word and our one-on-one isn't until next week. Let me just throw that into a card somewhere, or let me create the one-on-one card and I'll add notes to it. So when the one-on-one comes up, I'm coming into that meeting with an agenda or something like that. So that's why we keep on hitting on that. Okay. I think we are good to move on here. So we're actually going to split the class up. So use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you would like to go into the room where we are going to talk about taking the Netflix mockup, drawing the squares on it like we have before, and then going through and doing an outline on that so that we can understand kind of that next stepping stone of breaking down the engineering. If you do not have your hand raised, you should be diving right into the Netflix project using the starter files that we already had from I'm sorry, from Thursday. I don't know where I went there. Okay, it actually looks like the most of the class would like to go through that outlining step. So what I'm going to do is you guys can all lower your hand. And what I will do is if you just want to go work on your Netflix project, go ahead and just jump out of this Zoom room and make sure you have the CIC live stream channel open. Because once we complete that exercise, I will just ping you guys of, hey, we're done this. You know, you can hop back into the room. But if you feel like you're making good progress on your Netflix site already and want to just dive right into that, just drop out of Zoom, make sure you have Slack open, and I will ping you when we have the floor open to just general questions on that. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen again. Again, no hard feelings if you want to just drop and work on the Netflix project. That is completely fine. So I am going to go grab from the outline the Netflix mockup, and I'm going to download this file, and then I'm going to open it from my downloads. And here's where we're at. So I think you guys have seen this already, but interrupt me if you have any questions. So what we're going to do, you know, I wonder if it's going to be helpful. Let's go pull up. I still have 960 downloaded. If you don't have 960, the grid system downloaded, you can go to 960.gs and literally hit the big ol' download button. And I'm going to grab this col 12, double click on it to open it, copy it, and paste it. Oh, that didn't do what I wanted. I thought that that was going to be transparent, and I don't know that it is. Okay, let's try something else. Let's do a search for 12 column grid. And I'm gonna do a search type for transparent. And let's see if this will work for me. So I'm going to drag that to my desktop. I'm going to Command A copy, Command A paste. Drag that open. That is not as dark as I wanted it to. Never mind, we're just going to do it the way we've been doing it. Sorry about the detour. Okay. First things first, let's go through and just do our rows. So where is our first row on this mockup?
I would say the whole thing.
What do you mean the whole thing?
Like the container that's going to contain all the stuff that's on the page.
So that's a container, and yes, our container is going to contain everything, but let's dive in at the row level first. So where's our first row?
The navigation bar.
You got it. Okay. From our nav bar, where is our next row?
The in series.
Yep, and so that is, we are actually going to be careful there because this whole thing is actually going to be our row. And based off of that, we're going to go through and break that up, break that down into sub rows. But first we want to start at the top, work all the way down, get all of our rows done, and then we'll go back in and start saying, hey, do these need their own rows or do they need columns into them? So we're going to just keep going here. We're going to say, hey, all of this tiny little row and then a big row. And tiny little row and big row. And then our last two. So if you hold in shift and click on two of them, it will actually let you copy and paste them at the same time. And I'm going to put that in. Okay. So there, that starts everything. Now let's work our way back up to the top. To me, the Netflix logo gets its own little column. And the reasoning behind that is we know the sizing of it. We know that that should be that should be a set size. So I'm going to change my box outline color to red, and I'm going to put that in here. Now the next column, believe it or not, is going to be all of my links here. And the reasoning behind that is the spacing between the Netflix logo and those links is different than the spacing between home, TV shows, movies, all of these. So because these spacings are the same, we can just put them in line and add some space between them. And the same goes for all of these over here, right? These all have consistent spacing between the left and the right, so all of that becomes its own little column. Okay, so now we're going to continue on down here. And really what we've got going on is this, to me, looks like it's all in one column. And then over here, we've got another column with some space in between. So we're actually going to make this one column. And we're going to make this another column over here. Okay, but now we're looking in here and we're going, well, there are a lot of different things in here, but the width of all of those is the same, right? We don't need to break that up into different areas, except maybe that last one. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in, we're going to grab our blue box, copy and paste it, and say, this is now going to be either a row or a div. This is going to be a row or a div. Now this may be a good one to not only row, but also do a div. So we've got top 10 in one area and number 2 shows in another. So we're going to do, we'll come back to that. This is obviously all one area. And then we finally have the last one. Okay, from there, now that we've got more divs broken up, we don't need to break this one up anymore, right? Question, Christy?
What do we say when you're going too fast?
Speeding ticket?
Yes. Can you give us a few minutes to catch up?
Actually, you know what? We're really close to the end here. So let me just finish that. I've got like 3 more minutes, and then I'll give you a break to catch up if you want to follow along. And if not, I can just send you this file. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we don't need a column here because that's just going to be the size of the text or the font. There's nothing else in this row that we need to offset or get moving somewhere else. Same for Bridgerton, right? That's a set size. Now this one in here, we may need to get this top 10 and our number 2 in TV shows today at a different area or spacing them, right? And so the way to think about our divs or our columns or our rows is that something that we need to target in our CSS differently from other things that are right next to it. So this case, the top 10, we're going to have to style differently than this number 2 in TV shows today. So that is going to get another sub area. So I'm going to say the top 10 is going to be one div, and then our other one is going to be our number 2 TV shows today. Okay, this area doesn't need to be broken up anymore, but this area does, because our play button is a different size than our more info. So I'm going to bring that over here, drag that over. Okay. Now over here, same thing going on. Our TV, MA, and our button need to be targeted separately. So we don't want to forget about them. We're going to drag those over. And just so that we're alternating colors, I'm going to change the layout on those to be a different color. For green. And because these are kind of in their own row, I'm going to make these green as well, just so you can identify that they're in their own little row. Okay. Now, hopefully this becomes easy. These 3 areas, they're already in their own little div. They're already in their own little row. But these are definitely going to need to be their own columns, right? So we're going to go in. We're going to do a new one. We're going to go back to red because it's only 1 level deep. And hopefully it's pretty easy to see. We've got 1 column here. We've got another column here. And it goes all the way across. So I won't do that on all of them. Hopefully you get the idea. I am typing things and I don't know what I'm even typing. But hopefully you get the idea of these columns go all the way across. And once you get one of these done, it's going to be very easy to copy this entire row, paste the HTML down here, change the text at the top, and then go through and swap out the images. So important questions to ask here are not, oh, I followed along with that, I'm fine. The important question to ask here is, but why did you do it this way? So if you have any questions about, like, why didn't you make that one big row? Or why is that multiple columns instead of one big one? Any kinds of questions about that, now's the time to ask it before we go into the text outline step.
I have a question in the first row, where you have the 3 columns defined.
Yes.
And then there's the big gap between the second and the third. Is that part of one of those 3 columns? Or are the columns going to be spaced apart?
The easiest way to get this spacing done would be to put in another column here that's going to have nothing in it, which is often called an offset column. So it is a good idea to put this in here just so that this empty column is pushing this column all the way over to the right. The other way you could do it is you could remove this column and make this column go all the way over and then make this a text end so all of the elements are over to the right. And that's actually probably the better way of doing it. Because these are so small, that means when your page starts shrinking down, this column will balance everything out. But I could see doing it either way. So that's kind of where the flexibility of Flexbox comes in and why I have those listed as additional options. Because what Flexbox does is it gives you power outside of the grid system to say, hey, when the page starts shrinking down, actually start shrinking this column to the point where it just is fitting in these items. So that's kind of the like advanced mastery of front end is getting into Flexbox and controlling what they call the flex grow or the flex shrink properties. But to get started, on your project and kind of just getting it right at a certain screen size, I would probably go for the offset column technique of putting in another one just so things are spaced out correctly as you're working on them.
So I did that when I was working on my portfolio homepage. I ended up making some empty columns just to get everything laid out right. But then I ran into trouble where when I shrank it down and things would start stacking up, now there were empty columns getting stacked that messed up the smaller layout.
Yeah, and it's possible to actually say, don't show this column when we hit a certain screen size. I think the way you do it is like col xs-0. I have to confirm that that's how you do it. But that would basically say, hey, this column should disappear when we're on a screen size of extra small.
Okay.
And so that is one way to approach it. We are going to do our Netflix website not responsive first. So like get your window set pretty big and make sure you've got the room to lay it out. And then from there we can, you could always go back and add in responsiveness and target different column sizes and all of that fun stuff. Believe it or not, the current Netflix site is not responsive because they push everyone to their mobile app. So when you go to Netflix, oh, I'm not signed in here. Darn it. If you go to Netflix and shrink the window way down to what would be a mobile size, it basically just makes everything very tiny. It may make it so there are less columns of video showing, but you would be shocked at how unresponsive the Netflix homepage is. And that is mainly because Netflix has made the decision of, hey, if you're watching Netflix on a phone or on a mobile device, chances are you should download our app because you're going to get a better streaming experience from the app. So that is a conscious decision Netflix made of basically, hey, if your window is super narrow, you're going to be better off using an app or making the window bigger if you're on a desktop display or laptop. Danielle, question.
Yes. Back to that same verse, or excuse me, the column at the top that has the search bar. Why didn't you separate it out into smaller green boxes like you did in the other?
Yeah, so because these are all evenly spaced, I know that I'm not going to have to target each individual one. I can target all of them as a group, right? So for this one in here where we did our first green box, I knew this top 10 was going to have to get its own styling, right? It was going to have to get a red background. It was going to have to get black text. Same over here, right? This number 2 in TV shows today is a slightly different font, either thickness or size than this down here, right? So I knew I was going to have to target this independently of the top 10. So because of that, I made them their own little divs. But up here, I know that every link in this bar is going to get styled exactly the same. And they're going to have just 10 pixels of margin on the left or on the right of them that are going to spread them out. So that's why I didn't break this down any further, because all of the styling in that column was all going to get the same thing applied to it. We don't need to break it down any further.
And is that's the same for the group on the right at the top?
Correct. Yeah, and we may have to go back in and add in some green things as we get into our code of, oh, we may need a span or we may need a column there. But the way I try to think about when I'm doing this gridding exercise is not, hey, let's go find every div or every span or every HTML element we need. What my approach to this that I'm trying to think of in advance is, what am I not going to be able to lay out unless it's its own element, right? So, okay, I need to be able to lay this out so this refresh button is next to the TVMA. So because of that, I need to break that down into more sections. But for something like this, I'm going to be able to lay this out and get the spacing right without having to break that down into smaller pieces. Now, down the road, as I'm working on this, I may go, oh, you know what? It's just going to be easier if I've got a search in a different div. So I could go in and during my coding process, add in those different divs and break it out. But what I try and do here is say, am I not going to be able to lay this out unless it's in its own div? Or can I get away with saying like, hey, all the links in the top right are just going to be one div, and I know that I can get those links roughly in the right spot if I have that all in one big div. So in this case, we didn't break it up because we can get the layout correct up there and our top bar finished. And then as we go in and add those individual elements, we could always layer it back in. But for something like this, I'm identifying early on, hey, this styling is different from this styling. So breaking them into their own little columns or their own divs is going to be helpful. Larry, question.
Yes. So for the where it says end series right above Bridgerton.
Yes.
Why is that not separated from the end from the series?
Great question. This is going to depend on how we actually approach the end series. If the N is an image, which it looks like it is, and series is text, we would break that down into their own little green boxes. If the N series is all coming in as one transparent image, we don't need separate rows for that because it's all one image. So I'm going to, I think it's actually going to be helpful. Give me 1 second. I'm going to sign into Netflix. And let's use the inspect tool to figure out what that actually looks like.
And another thing I noticed on the site that when you shrink the box, excuse me, when you shrink the window past a certain size, that the Netflix logo actually adjusts size.
Yes, that answer is going to be in your homework tonight at Free Code Camp using media queries.
Okay. And then for the top 10 and the number 2 in TV shows, since those are 2 separate divs, you said, would we have to use is it inline to keep them on the same line?
Or span elements, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Great questions. Let me try that again. Okay. So in my Netflix project, oh, you're going to do fancy animations and show me up now. Come out of mobile mode. That Netflix series is not going to show up now and it's going to cause me problems. Let's see if I refresh the page. Of course, my top one that they're recommending is not a Netflix series, so I'm not going to be able to go back and check that. Let's come back to that question in 1 minute. I want to see if something else pops up and has that Netflix series, we can inspect it. But basically, the general thinking here is that if this is all one image that you're pulling in, it doesn't need separate columns. But if it's going to be like this top 10, which is separate from the number 2 shows today, you would need 2 separate columns so you could affect the series lettering and spacing separately from that end there. And one thing to note here is this does not need to be what we call a pixel perfect mockup. So if you get to something and you're like, I don't know where I can get this N logo, or, you know, I just want to move on to the next thing, it's okay to just say series at the top of it and move on to the next thing. So if there are little image assets that are missing in my downloads folder, because I think all I have is this logo and the images of the shows down at the bottom. So if you are missing something, it's okay to skip that and omit that from your code and your design and just move on to the next section, right? So for something like Bridgerton, you're going to want to play around with a Google font and find something that looks different. But if you can't find the exact font that Bridgerton is using, that's completely okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead. Nope. Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, that was me. In the main area, the big hero image, the where you have the 2 red boxes, as you're blocking that out, what do you know about the vertical placement? Like, are those red boxes going to be columns that go the full height of the row, or are those columns going to be floating?
This is the height of the row. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a margin top in this area here that's going to push that whole column down.
Got it. Okay.
And then same thing over here is I'm going to do a bigger margin top to get that where I want it to go.
Thank you.
Yep. And in that case, you could also use padding. But normally when you want the whole box to move down, you're not talking about the area in the box. That's when you want to use your margin instead of your padding. Although in this case, because we don't have a border, they would affect it exactly the same way.
Got it. Thank you.
Shantina, go ahead.
Which section does the main image belong to?
Great question. We are going to use a CSS property called background image, and we are going to make that a background image for our blue row. And as we get this spaced out properly and have margin bottom on the bottom of it, that's going to make this whole blue area grow big enough that when we put our background image in, it's going to look like it is spanning the whole area.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Great questions so far, every one of them. Quick, before Christy can find her unmute button.
Cut it out. Bazinga. So all of this is going to be based off 12, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we can start breaking that down in this next step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Google Doc. Week 4 new file, and we're gonna call this grid outline. And let me share, and anyone with a link, and copy, and done. And then in my week 4, I'm going to add at the resources down at the bottom our grid outline. And we'll also drop this in the live stream. I'm going to say week 4, day 1. There is the grid outline, and then I'm also going to save this image and put it in Slack.
How are we saving ours?
If you save it, it will basically flatten the image so that you won't be able to go in and adjust these boxes down the road. But if you just hit File, Save, and close it, and then reopen it, like I said, you won't be able to adjust the boxes, but they will save the boxes into the image.
So where should we put it? I mean, well, how do we hang on to it?
It's just a PNG. So it's up to you where if you want to put it in your My Code folder and put it under week 4, day 1, you could store it in there. If you want to create a separate folder on your desktop called resources and store it there, you could do that. If you want Trello to be your main repository of all of that, you could create a new card in Trello that says like Netflix box and upload that image into there. Whatever works for you is fine with me.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started, and I'm going to say, hey, the big mama that contains all of these things is my container. So I'm going to start with my container, and you know what? That container, because I know this needs to be full width, is I'm going to make that a container fluid. And then I'm going to start my outline. So I'm going to go to bullets, and I'm going to blow this up just one more step. And I'm going to start at the top, right? So I'm going to say my row, and my row is going to be for my nav bar, right? And so I'm just going to add in parentheses, hey, what am I working for on this? Now, my first one has a col, I don't know, that looks like a -1 to me. And that is going to be my Netflix logo. Okay, now coming in, this, let me zoom out just a tiny little bit. If we work our way back, we've already got 1 here, right? So let's do 12 minus 1. That leaves us with 11. My guess would be that this looks like a 4 or a 5. So that doesn't take it exactly halfway. So if, let's say that's going to be a col 4. And that's going to be our category links. And then we've got, I don't know, that looks like a 3 to me at the end. So I'm actually going to say blank, come back to that one in a second. And then I'm going to say that's going to be a col 3 at the end. And that's going to be my right icons. And now we come back and we say 12 minus 1 minus 4 minus 3. That leaves us with 4, right? So I just hit Command Space, which is what pulls up our Spotlight. And a lot of hidden things in Spotlight that a lot of users don't know about. One of them is that you can actually use it as a calculator. So when I hit Command Space, we always start with 12. And what I did is I just subtracted out my logo, my category, and my right icons. That leaves us with 4. So I'm going to say this blank area is going to be a col 4, and it's going to be a blank offset spacer column. Okay, now I'm going to come back out of that, go back out, and say now I'm going to get a new row, and I'm going to call that main show. Does that work for you guys? Now, in that row, we are going to have some other things going on. We are going to have a col dash, and I'm going to look at this. This is my halfway point. So it's not quite a col 6, so this must be a col 5. So I'm going to say col 5, and I'm going to say show info. Then I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to say, well, this looks like maybe a 2 to me. So I'm going to say my col 2, and that's going to be show rating. And then we're going to do the same thing. 12 minus 5 minus 2, that's going to leave us 5. So we're going to do a col 5, and that's going to be a blank offset spacer col. But we're not done there. We can't go on down to the bottom because we've got more blue in here. We've got more broken out. So we need to keep going there. So in this show info, we never do columns in columns. We always do columns in rows in other columns. So we're going to start a new row there. And we are going to say, okay, all of this is going to be, well, so for this one to get started, we actually don't need a row here. We just need a generic div because we don't have any columns inside of that yet. But we know we are going to want to target that specifically so we can get the series text to look and show up differently. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make that a generic div. But we're going to do in parentheses and series, so we're keeping track of it. And then we don't need to do anything else in there because we've got our content going in. So we're going to do another div, and that's going to be show title. Now we do need a row here because we've got subcolumns going on within. So we're going to do a row, and that row is going to be our top rating info. And within that row, we are going to do a col for our top 10, and then another col for our number 2 in TV shows. And now we need to figure out our spacing. So when we figure out the spacing for that row in there, it's not 12 starting here and going all the way over to here. It's only going to be 12 starting here and going over to here. So we can look at that and say, even though this looks like a 1, because that column is so shrunk down, let's start that as a 3, and then we can make this a 9, even if it doesn't end up using all of that space. So I'm going to say that's a 3, and this is a 9. Now, I could be wrong here, right? We could start doing this and going, oh no, a 3 leaves too much space between here and here. We need to adjust that down to a 2 or a 1, and that's okay. Now we're going to keep going, but just like our outline, before we do a new div or a new row or a new anything, we need to figure out, do I want to be adding another column to this row, or do I want to come out a level back to where I'm at and work on another section, right? Going top down. So we're going to keep going here, and we're going to say this is just going to be another div because it's going to span the full width. We don't have any columns within it. And then we're going to say show description. Now down here, we've got our columns. So we do have to do a row, and it's going to be buttons. And then that looks like it's the halfway point to me. So let's make these equal 3 and 3s. So I'm going to say col 3 is going to be play button, and another col 3 is going to be the more info button. Then we don't need anything in our spacer. but we're going to come over here, and now we've got this going on, and those are different columns inside this tiny little column going on here. So we're going to say, hey, this col 2, we can't put columns in columns. We have to put columns inside rows, which then can have columns. So we're going to say a row, and then that column, they look pretty even to me. So let's just do a col 6 for the restart. And then a col 6 for the rating. Okay, and then last thing I'm going to do here before I set you guys free is when we come down here, we now have this whole main show area done. So what we are now able to do is say, well, this released in the past year is obviously another row, but it's a row at that top level, at the highest level. So in our outline, we need to back our way all the way out to our row and say that is now the row title, right? And this can even be a div because we don't have columns inside of it. So we can just say that's now a div, and then we keep going. Well, this has columns inside of it. So we need to do a row, and we're going to say show images. And then inside of that, we're going to do a call for show number 1 IMG and another call for a show number 2 IMG and go from there. Okay, hopefully you guys can take it from here if you want to continue the outline. But does everyone understand how we would take this and now start applying it in our code? Or do you want me to go through that process in VS Code with the outline?
I think I'm good so far.
Okay.
I just have one quick question.
Yep.
For the spacers, we only utilize spacers when there's space in between where the columns that have something in them. Okay.
Yep.
So
and only vertically. If you're doing something, no, only horizontally. You only use a spacer if you need space between columns horizontally. If you need space between columns vertically, you can just add margin or padding onto the column itself. But if you're in the grid system and want to space things out horizontally, then yes, you only need the columns then.
Okay, thank you.
Zach, question.
This is probably a stupid question, but so if you create a new row, it's assumed that it like divides the screen into 12 sections. So if you create like if you create a row that's like 3 out of 12, and then you create like a div or like a subsection, that whole subsection is assumed to be divided into 12 segments, even though it only takes up 3 segments of the screen.
So here's the yes, you're totally right. You're thinking about it the right way. So here's a good way to think about it, right? Here is a col 5, right? And that 5 is going to be the same size as this 5 plus the 1 because it's the whole screen, right? But this 5 is a whole heck of a lot wider than this 6. And the reason behind that is because this 6 is in a tiny little col 1 or 2. So whenever we put a new row in, we reset our 12, and now it is the 12 of the available space of the grandparent column it's in, right? Because this is a col 6 inside of a row, and that row is inside a col 2. So now you are subdividing that col 2 into that 12 again, and so a 6 and a 6, even though this 6 is, tiny and minuscule, it is still a 6 compared to this, which is a 5, because the grandparent column is what's resetting that 12 or controlling how wide the entire row is, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you didn't wrap your head around that, let me try that one more time. Whenever we start a new row, we are resetting here. So this is not a col 1 and a col 1 because it's not based off of the whole page width. It's actually, this is its own row, inside a col 2 or a col 3, right? So because we went, where is that? Here. This is a col 2, but because we opened a new row, in order to get them side by side, it's going to be a 6 and a 6. Now, normally a 6 and a 6 would be half the screen and the other half of the screen, but because we're putting it into this row here, that 12 resets, and it's now going to be based off of how wide the col 2 is, and dividing up that col 2 into 12 equal spaces again. That may not make sense now, but as you start coding it, it will make more sense. Ariel, I know the grid is something that you wrestled with for a fair bit. Is there anything that you found particularly helpful before diving in at any step of the process?
So after going through the outline you just did, I'm over here doing the same thing because I didn't know who would need it. That has always worked for me. That was the only way I could do it, was the Google Doc outline. Drawing it up like this, it's easy to confuse yourself between the two when you get into it, because you start trying to figure out which one is the row and which one is the column. The row is always going to be your horizontal. Column is always going to be, you can have the row in the column, but you're not going to have it. He just went over it. The point is, the easiest way to do it would be that outline and go over section by section, color code all of it. If you don't move on until you get that one section done, because once you start moving your pad or your padding and your margin, it's going to all get jacked up. It's all, the only thing I could tell you that really helped me was doing it that way with this grid.
And so I will say, if this is helpful to you, do this on every single site that you make, right? Because there are a lot of elements going on. And if you get your layout wrong at the beginning, everything else in the site is going to fall apart from there. So I would highly recommend, don't add a single image, don't add any content, don't add dummy everything, and just get your entire layout done. Get everything on the page so that you know, hey, if I put this here, this image is going to show up in the right spot, right? Get everything done on your layout first, and then go back in and start plugging in the words and the links and all of that. Some people prefer to work from the top down, and they say, I'm going to get my whole navbar finished, I'm going to get my whole navbar pretty, and then I'm going to move on to the next section. And then I'm going to get all my show information pretty, and then I'm going to add in the background image, and then I'm going to add in the rating. That's a fine approach to take too, but if you're struggling with getting lost between your divs and not getting things laying out where you want them to, I would highly recommend taking this approach. So you should be able to make a copy of this document. I have it linked in the outline under grid outline. So if you would like to, you can take this, finish this off, and then dive into your code from there. So we do have 9 minutes before break. So I'm going to utilize that just to show you how this flow works. So I'm going to pop open my VS Code. I'm not going to share this because I want you guys to do this on your own, but I just want to show you how this process translates into helping us. So we've got our code starter point from yesterday, and we have already started. Let me go live. I'm probably in the wrong project. Close this, go live. Okay, so we started with our max flicks. But if we look, we already have our container fluid. So we go back to our outline, we have our container fluid. Now we said we had a row, and that was going to be for our nav bar. So we've got our row, and you guys have said comments help you. So put in a comment there and say start of nav bar row, and then figure out where that ends. Click down onto our div, that's closing it. So I'm going to say end of nav bar row. Now, we already identified the Netflix logo is going to be a col 1. So let's adjust that to a col 1. Now, our category links are a col 4. So I'm going to say div class col 4. And all I'm going to do is look at my mockup, and we've got home and TV shows and movies. I'm not going to try and fit them all in there. I'm just going to say home, TV shows. Oops. And that's just going to be my starting point. So I'm like, great, let's move on from there. We've got another 4. So we're going to say div class is a 4. And then just so I know what's going on there, so I don't forget that this is meant to be empty, page intentionally left blank, we're going to do the same thing here, right? We're just going to say space or col. And then we're going to do our div class col 3. And I'm just going to say right icons. So we're going to save. We're going to come over to Maxflix. And believe it or not, they are all there, but they're in black. And they're really hard to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my style CSS. And I'm going to say, by default, anything in my body element, make that white text so we can see it. Okay, well, this is interesting. My right icons look like they're on that right side of the screen, but my home and TV shows and all of that are on top of my Maxflix logo. So we can go into our dev tools and look at this and say, oh, I wonder what happens if we take this width and say, hey, don't be any more than 100% of that column that you're in. And now that shrunk it down for us. So I can go back in and I can add an ID here and call it my nav bar. And then in my style, I can target my nav bar and say, in the nav bar, go look for any image tag. And in that image tag, make sure the width is no more than 100%. And that's going to make a little liar out of me because I didn't save my index.html. And that's it. We just did our whole navbar. Now we need to go back in and style the links and do all of that. But hopefully it's obvious how this level of indentation is lining up exactly with our indentation here with our rows and our columns. So this outline is really helping us understand, hey, now we're done with this. When I come back and do a row for my main show, that's on the same indentation of my row navbar. So I need to come to this div class row, come down to the end, and now say, hey, my row is going to start here. And we know that it's going to have a col 5 in it. And when it has the col 5, if Max can type, that's going to get our main show info. We come back over, and there's our main show info, and now we start on spacing and getting all of that working. But it is as simple as making a mistake and putting this up in our navbar by accident, and now, well, that's going to make a little liar out of me because it's going to wrap down anyway. But that could cause problems. Let's put it in an even more wrong spot. Now my main show info is over here. All because we're not following our right div structure. Right? So these outlines are just helping us understand, hey, my next row shouldn't be all the way in here. Where it really should be is outside of this row and all the way down here. Okay. Believe it or not, that is all that I have tonight. So what we are going to do is take a 20-minute break. We'll be back at 7:20. And then when we come back, we're just spending the rest of the night working on code, putzing along, asking questions when you get stuck. If you are someone who tends to work better alone, that is fine. If you want to work in a group, just message me or Ariel and we can actually move you into a breakout room so you guys can work virtually but still as a group. That's completely fine. But for right now, let's take our break and we'll see you guys at 7:20.
Thank you, Max. Max, can you send the breakdown file of the image?
It is in the CIC Livestream C3 channel in Slack.
Thank you.
See you guys at 7:20.
Okay, sure. Alrighty, so VS Code. Oh, it's over here. That's why I'm so confused. I'm all over the place right now.
So what you need to do is in your style.css, you want to well, that would work, but your width is not quite.
Oh, that will probably make a little bit more.
And do a semicolon at the end of that. And then there's no such CSS property as color text, just color.
Okay.
And then your body is going to be a lowercase b.
Okay.
And if you save that and save your index.html, see if that does what you want.
Okay. And it did.
Beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Wayne, go ahead and unmute yourself so I can hear you.
So my little issue is when I do the inspect right here. No, crap. Where did I go? Yeah.
Just right click on the, oh, that works too.
So why is that not this but this?
So two things that I'm wondering about. Pop open your head tag for me in the inspect area. Or just go back to your code. Okay, so two problems that we've got going on. One, you don't have bootstrap coming in. And so all of our rows and columns aren't going to work because you don't have bootstrap coming in your head.
That's fine, okay.
And then the other thing I will say that I'm going to leave you to try and fix is that your style.css file is not linked to your index.html. So those are the two things you need to work on, is getting your style tag linked and then also getting your bootstrap imported as well.
Let me do that and see if that works.
So I'm going to stop your screen share. If you're still having problems, you can come back in. Go ahead, Christy.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
And just to be clear, you shouldn't just be working on getting your navbar working. This is the whole project that you have free reign on now. So as soon as you get the top navbar working, go on to that next section, start working on that.
Okay. So I can't get my image to show up.
Okay, so your problem here is collapse the MaxFlix project for me over here. Okay, so the problem that you have is your index.html is in MaxFlix, but image is not in your MaxFlix folder.
Oh.
So if you drag that whole IMG folder into MaxFlix and move, and then stop your server and go live. So just go live down at the bottom. That still doesn't work, and that is... Oh, how did you... Try moving IMG into MaxFlix again? Yep, let go. Okay, now hit go live.
Is it in there?
I don't know. Collapse the folder. The MaxFlix up at the top. How is it not going in there? You know what? Try this. Try grabbing IMG and putting it like on top of style.css. It really does not want to move that in. Okay, let's do this instead. Just go to Finder and move it in Finder.
Oh, wrong thing.
Max, does it matter she has it in a workspace? Because I know I can't drag and drop into one of those normally.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna fix by hand in Finder. But thank you for that.
I didn't even understand how I got it in workspace. Okay, what? I clicked on Finder, but
just hit Command. Go back, click on it again. It's probably on your other monitor.
It's not.
Okay, so click on Finder, and then.
Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Can I bring it over? Okay, I'm in Finder.
You got to bring it over to the other monitor so I can see what you're doing.
Oh boy. That's not. Can I switch my screen share?
Yep, you can do that.
It's not.
You got to stop it and then you can restart it again.
I'm trying to pull it. So Zoom is on this screen. Oh my God. Stop share. Screen share. So it must be desktop too. Oh wait. Share.
Okay, now go to Finder and open the Finder window. Okay. Go to your week 4 and MaxFlix. Okay, and your IMG isn't even in here. So your IMG is probably in your downloads folder. So put your mouse up at the top and come out of full screen mode so we can have multiple windows. The green icon over on the left. Okay, now hit Command N, and what that's going to do is it's going to open up a new window. Try again, Command N. Maybe click in here and then try Command N. Okay. And we're going to go to Downloads. And then go to week 4 up here. And MaxFlix. And then you want to click back in here to your other window and drag the whole IMG folder into here. Okay. Now that's got everything you need. So go ahead and close out of these two and go back to your VS Code. Or actually, is your image showing up now?
Let me see. Wait a minute. I don't know. I'm trying. Oh, there it is. Let me see. I have to refresh, right?
You might need to stop the server and start the server. If it's still not there, you got to share your other screen so I can see that one.
Okay, let me see. It's in Max. It's under the column. Should I delete the other one?
I can't see your screen, so I don't know. I don't know what you're looking at.
Let's see. Oh, I got it over here. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay. Should I delete this?
What I would do is delete that workspace.code-work.
Where's
this one? just delete that and move to trash. And then hit open folder. And just hit add down here. Oh, see, but you're in a workspace. Hit cancel.
Why am I in a workspace?
Close out of it. You must have opened something weird. Okay, go back to code up at the top and go to file. Open folder. Oh, why don't you even have... try quitting out of VS Code. Just hit Command Q. Yep. Click that. And now try reopening it. Okay, so now you should be good to go. Just close out of that file up at the top. And
This
now,
one?
yep. And now when you start your live server, the image should be there.
Oh God, it's humongous. Wait a minute.
Okay, so you're on to your next problem. I think you need to check out your index.html in the head tag, because I think you've got some tags up there that you got to clean up.
Okay. All right.
So I'll let you keep going on that. And then if you're still stuck, let me know.
Okay. Oh boy.
Anyone has questions, just jump off mute and start your screen share. Otherwise, have fun working.
So my next issue is I want to move the home away from the Netflix.
Okay, I think the problem is actually your Netflix logo is too big. So you've got a full width class. I'm sorry, full width ID. Go back to your style.css. So you've got a full width, and we know the problem has to be something with that class. So do you see anything wrong in there?
PX 100%.
That's exactly the problem, Nicole. 100 what? 100 pixels, 100 feet, 100%. Okay, so save that. And now let's go back. And so that's still not working. So let's go back to your HTML. And let's look at your image. And your image doesn't have an ID on it. So we've got major problems going on here. One is if you write any line of code and it doesn't work, you should stop and not write more code, because you will dig yourself into a hole that gets very hard to come out of. So like when you added your style tag and it didn't work, and then you added your ID and that didn't work, and then you added something else and it didn't work, the right answer is not, oh, just move on, I'll come back to it and fix it. It's let's focus on that and get that working. Because otherwise you're going to run into issues later with your code of like it becoming very hard to go back and fix. So go ahead and add your ID full width there and make sure that that fixes your image. Okay, so that's got that size down correctly now. Now, before I add anything else, I would figure out why my search icon, kid, smart toy, all of that is not showing up where it should be. So first thing to do is go back to your code and try and go find where that div is. Okay, so highlight where that div col 3 is. Yep. And oftentimes in the grid system, the problem isn't with the column itself, it's with what's right above it. There you go. So save that. Now you're making progress. Now that's in the right spot, so we can just keep going from there. The other thing I'll mention is your indentation is not correct. So how do we know that this in here is the same in this div? Because these two are lining up and shouldn't be. So I would suggest that you go in and get, like, it's clear that this image is in this col 1 because this indentation is correct. It's clear this div class row contains all of this content in here because that indentation is correct. So I would go through and get your A tag indentation right on this div class column and make sure your closing tags are lining up, and then that should make everything else easier to figure out why it's not working the way you want. So you're going the wrong direction. You opened a new div here, so this A tag should actually be 1 over. There you go, you got it now. Nope, wrong direction. You opened a div here, so that has to be indented. There you go. And now it should... the problem may be that you've got... Oh, you somehow removed the dash in your call for.
Again. Yeah.
And make sure you accidentally typed 1 down on 48. There you go. And so now you can start fiddling with that and figuring out what's going on there.
Thank you.
I think you may have used a button, and that button may be forcing everything down onto the next row, but you can keep going from there. Any other questions?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Scotty.
Okay, quick question. Is there a CSS class to change like the size of my text?
Yes, that is going to be font dash size.
Thank you.
And the other one that you'll be asking for next is font dash weight. And a reminder that you can use Google Fonts if you would like to change up the fonts available to you.
Okay, thanks.
Zach, you're up.
So how do I get like home, TV shows, all that stuff on the same row as my logo?
So you're going to use span tags around each one of them, and that span tag is going to make them all in line and then also allow you to adjust the spacing between them.
I did use span tags, but they're all showing up under my logo.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look.
They're showing up like this.
Do you have, scroll up. Do you have the link for Bootstrap coming in? No, you do not. So your cols and rows aren't working because you don't have Bootstrap in your head tag.
Okay.
So if you go getbootstrap.com.
Oops.
Well, I have Bootstrap.
And that's the one. Yep. And then the other thing is you've got a capital S in your style sheet for the rel, and that could be why your style sheet isn't working. On 12. Okay, save that, and now let's see what your... Are you sure you have the right file open? Try scrolling up there and seeing if the div tag and putting in the link in there will fix it. So between 8 and 9.
Yeah, I guess I didn't paste it. That was weird.
Okay, well that's progress. Okay, so is Notflix the one that you want to work on, or MaxFlix?
Notflix.
Okay, so let's fix the S in your style sheet as well on this one. And then scroll down a little bit. Okay, so the first place we notice this going wrong is the row, right? The row isn't working the way we want it to. So here's our row. Oftentimes, it's often the thing right above it that's causing our row not to work.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the line above it. Do we see anything wrong with that? Mm-hmm. And then go ahead and close out that, or delete that out. Yeah, because you don't actually want that. And then save. And then if we keep going, do we see something wrong on line 18? Because I noticed this div isn't the right color of this closing div. So that's how that jumps out to me. And then image tags are always self-closing tags, so you need the little slash before the... Yep, there you go. Save that. And now refresh. Okay, now we're making progress. Col 2, col 4. Okay, so now your next thing is your image width needs to be 100%. So you want to do that in your nostyle.css. Add a class there called full width, apply that to the image, and then keep going. No, not... when we do class in CSS, how do we... What's the symbol for class? That's ID. Period for class, and then just call it full width. And yep, and then do your width colon 100%. And semicolon, save, and then in your Notflix, add class equals full width on that. On the image itself, yeah. And don't forget your quotes. Okay, save and refresh.
Nice.
Okay, so now you're making progress.
Okay.
I'm going to stop your screen sharing. Just keep going. I think you're on the right track.
Okay, thanks.
Larry, go ahead.
Let's see. Okay. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so I'm trying to get this avatar to fit within the row and column.
Yeah, so this is a good example for everyone if you want to take a quick break and look at this, because I think a lot of you may get stuck up here. Stuck here. I shouldn't say stuck up here. That sounded wrong. So what we were able to do is we could use a width 100% for the MyFlix logo, because we wanted it to be 100% of the column, right? So we were using the column width to control the image size. But here, this panda icon isn't in its own column. So when we're saying width 100%, it's spanning the width of the column from here to here, and it doesn't know what, 100% of the whole column. Sure, no problem. So what we want to actually do is I would change that class and call it something like profile icon. And now go to your CSS. And, rename that to profile icon. And, yep, you got it. Okay. And then in the width, instead of 100%, try just making it like 50px. And save. And did not do what I was expecting it to do.
Now I do have a question. Does it make a difference that I'm using the web address for the picture?
No, it doesn't. What I do think the problem is I think our navbar image is overwriting our profile icon here. So in order to test that, just put your cursor on line 7 and hit Command/. And that's going to comment it out and then save, and let's see if it does. Okay, so that did what we wanted it to do. Now it's applying to the image, but now our MyFlix is broken. So what I would do is comment the width back in, and then instead of targeting navbar img, instead go add an ID or a class to the logo image and target that instead.
Okay, thank you, Max.
Anyone have questions about that one before Larry stops sharing his screen? So that was a really good example. First of all, we instead of using 100%, we use 50px here. And the reason that we're doing that is we're saying we don't want it to be the whole column width. We just want to give you a set size. So that's the first thing we did. The second thing we did was in this navbar image, we tried commenting out this line. And what that did is it broke our logo over here, but it did make our image go to the right size. So the problem was the browser was prioritizing this navbar image instead of using our width that we had set here. So what we end up needing to do is renaming this selector to use one that's more specific to just this MyFlix logo, and that's going to let our profile icon here actually be the right size.
So on another note, Max, that means that the ID trumps a class per se.
Exactly, and great observation, yes. So if you actually change this to an ID, it may or may not work. I don't know because there are 2 here, and so the specificity of 2 selectors may make the browser prioritize this one still. But in general, it's probably a good idea just to add an ID to your logo and then target just the logo instead of all IMG tags in the navbar.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
I have a quick question.
Yep, go ahead.
Is there any way I can go in the breakout room with Ariel, because I'm at a standstill and I just don't know where to go?
Yep, absolutely. I will move you into that. Okay, you both should have an invitation to join that. Christy, go ahead.
So I got my max clicks smaller, but then now my spans are off.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look.
See, share screen.
Okay, so the first thing I notice is ID full width is showing up and should not be showing up. So let's go to our code and let's look at where the full width is.
I put that here, but I think I need a closing tag.
Well, yes, but look at where were you trying to add that? To what tag?
To the, I don't know if I need it for the logo. I'm confused on that. So
yeah, so right here you've got your closing tag for your image.
Uh-huh.
And then you tried to add another attribute to your image right there, but
I
it's not
put it
in that tag right there.
So I should have put it inside.
Correct.
Okay. Not inside. Wait, I'm confused. Not inside the quotes.
Okay, save. Okay, so that got rid of your ID full width. That's progress. Now what's happening up here? Oh, go back to your code. Equals ID? Or ID equals?
That would help.
All right, save that. And now you notice all of a sudden your colors feel more right. That's a really important thing to pick up on, right? As soon as my colors start going wrong, let's figure out what's going on. Okay, now I think scroll up to your head tag. Why do I have a bad feeling? Okay, we've got a link here. We've got a link here. We've got all of our meta tags up here. What is wrong other than those?
So this is from Thursday, and this was off Thursday, and I asked about this on Thursday because the whole tag, like normally it would be the whole tag, but for some reason mine split off.
Right.
And I thought it was wrong.
It is when the color goes wrong on that line, there is often a problem with either a line or two above it. So
okay, so
look at, there's nothing wrong with the href line. There's nothing wrong with the link right above it. But what is 2 lines above it?
This?
What's 2 lines above 11?
9.
Yep.
So that shouldn't be there? Or is it the same thing like a duplicate?
You tell me.
I think so.
So take that out. And notice all of a sudden your colors are right again. So save that, and now let's see what it looks like in your browser.
Oh my goodness. Where is it?
Chrome, right? Okay, so you're making progress.
So why is it so tiny? What in the...
Okay, so go back to your code.
Oh my God.
So work through one problem at a time, right? So you got your image logo here, and your ID is equal to full width, and your col looks right, and all of that looks good there. So let's go look at your style.css and look at your full width.
Oh, because I changed this because of when it was big. I changed that to 10% when it was humongous. Now let's see, where did it go?
All right, Now you're making
Wait,
progress.
now, okay, so now I gotta get I gotta get subtitles on the same line.
Yep,
right.
and that may just be a problem of there are too many links up there at the top.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just not all fitting into that column. So you could make that column a little bit bigger and then the spacer column a little bit smaller, and that would get them all up on the same line.
So make that one 5 and then make the offset 3.
Yes, you got it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hey Max, when I'm using image for that small icon at the top, should that also be in a span or no? So it can line up.
Good question. Yes, I think it should, because that would make the image be treated as an inline element.
Okay, and then before when I was having that issue where I couldn't like drag and drop a picture. I'm having that same issue, like downloading a picture and dropping it into. Hold on, I'll show you. Sorry. Share and okay, so I'm in my code. So I have it in a span, and then I pull up my downloads.
Okay, but you're not in downloads, you're in preview.
Oh, okay.
So hit cancel there. The problem that you have, cancel in the bottom right.
Okay.
The problem that you have is you don't have downloads in your dock, so let's fix that. I'm just going to request remote control. And to fix that, I'm going to go to Finder down in the bottom. And then I'm going to go to your downloads folder. And then from there, I'm going to drag that down into the dock.
Okay.
And now when you click on downloads, you'll have your downloads here.
Okay.
I prefer to not have it open like that. I actually prefer to open up as a fan and sort it by the date created. Actually, the date added. So now when we click on it, it's going to show you the latest files in there, and then you can just drag it out from there. So now when you're in your code, you can click in and go to Netflix and just drag it in, and then say copy folder. And that's going to move your image folder in.
Okay, and that's all the images.
Yes.
Okay, so this a new separate image that I'm adding for that. I guess that's a dumb question because you probably have one of those icons in there for us.
I don't. I actually don't. So that was totally intentional to make sure that you could source your own profile icons.
Okay, so now that I got this here, you're saying basically it should work by dragging it into not that.
Yeah, you could put it in the image folder or into general Maxflix. Either one will work.
Okay, perfect. And either I can just delete this out because I don't need that anymore. Okay.
And then if you're going to use that, just make sure that in your source tag, you do img/girl.jpg.
Okay, thank you.
If anyone else does not have the downloads folder in their dock and would like it, just let me know and I can help you get that added.
Okay, sorry, Max, it's me again. With it being in a span, I'm not seeing it pop up.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. Okay.
IMG slash, not dash.
Oh.
So we use slashes to represent, like, go into this folder, and then another slash would say go into another one.
Okay.
And then be careful there. You've got a span, and then IMG, and then source equals. You want your IMG inside your span tag, not in the span itself.
Okay, I think you lost me.
Okay, so you see how you've got a span here, and it opens and it closes, and then inside of it, you've got notifications, and then your span closes it out there? The same goes for down here. You want a span that opens and closes, and then inside of that, you want an image. So go ahead and close your arrow there. Delete out that closing span that they added for you.
And then delete that other one that's on the end of PG.
No. Just open your IMG tag there. So right there. Yep. Okay, and now image tags always are self-closing. So at the end of that, just add a slash. Okay, save and see what that looks like.
Okay, and then now I should do what you were just telling us about with Larry.
You got it.
Okay,
Good work.
thank you. Thanks.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
I'm going to share my screen. I don't think I did the full width thing correctly for these.
Okay, so the first thing I notice is we're using full width in multiple places. So we should be using a class instead of an ID, but you've got an ID in your full width CSS. So I would change that to a class to get started.
So this is incorrect?
That I would do as a class instead of as an ID.
I thought I did do it as a class. Okay, hold on. All right.
So whenever it's a hashtag in your CSS, it's going to match up to an ID. Whenever it's a period, it's going to match up to a class.
My bad.
So
Thank
save
you.
that. And now let's go. Oh, yeah, refresh. Okay, there you go. You're on the right track.
Okay. So I'll fix that. And then at the top, my these.
Yep.
How do I separate those?
So you did those as spans, I'm guessing?
Yes.
So what I would do, go to your index.html. Let's just take a look at there before we start targeting things in your style. Okay, so okay, so that's in your col 6. So I would add an ID on line 26 and call that like category links or whatever you want to call those sections, or I don't care. Okay, so copy that ID and go to your CSS, and because it's an ID, we're going to want to use the #sign or the hashtag.
Let me just make sure I put it up here, because does the order matter where you
it does. In this case it wouldn't, but what we want to do is go ahead and target that ID, so hashtag, and then paste.
I guess I can't copy it. Okay, hold on. Oh, come on, Shan. All right, I just named it cat
link. Yep. And then what you want to do is not just target the cat link, you want to target the span tags inside the cat link. So before your curly brace, just do a space and then say span. And now inside of there, you could say, hey, add a little margin to the left of it So margin dash left.
That's a good idea.
5px.
Okay.
And then also don't forget to add it on the right so it's evened out. So you're also going to do a margin dash right 5px. And save and refresh. And now we got a little more space going on.
Okay, that's good. And then the last thing was the background. Is that something that we're going to do as a class?
Why not? Sure. Why don't I let's just do it on your code. I'm gonna just request remote control.
Yes, please. Mine is a little different because I played around with it a little bit before.
And you know what? Everyone's code is gonna be a little different, and that's okay. Like
Not
that
that one.
is
that's the wrong index. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, you can close that. Okay.
Okay, thank you for catching me there. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is and if everyone wants to go through this, we're gonna go over how to get that background image in. So I'm coming into someone else's code that I've never worked on before, right? And that's a very, very common thing to happen, is that I come in I come into a company, to a new job, and I may not necessarily know the person's code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inspect and just pretend like it's a public website, right? So I'm going to hover over this. I'm going to kind of hover and try and find out where my image is going to go. And so this is the closest thing that I can think of, right? So I'm going to click on that. And in Shantina's code, that is fighting me right there. Come on up. And you can come on down. Okay. So that is this div ID row ID bridge. So we've already got an ID on it. So that's going to be helpful. And I called this cover.jpg in the downloaded images. It's not the same exact one, but should be close enough for us to work with. So I'm going to go to the style.css. First thing I'm going to do is check. We already have a bridge. So that's a good starting point. We don't need to add another one. And so all I need to do is say, hey, my background image is going to be a URL.
Oh.
And that URL is going to be in my img folder called cover.jpg. And there's no way this is going to work on the first time because I couldn't be that close. Okay.
I don't have the image folder. That was what I couldn't get it to work.
Oh.
I pulled everything in, so it could just be cover.
Okay. So that's progress. Now we've got some issues going on, right? So it looks like we've got how'd you get that spacing in there?
It's padding that I put underneath the top, underneath my nav bar, I believe. I think.
Okay, so
margin bottom right
here. So instead of doing margin bottom, which is pushing everything down, really what we want to do is push the content of the bridge ID down. But we want there to be spacing in the background. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that off of your nav bar. And so that's going to move everything back up. And then in here, we're going to add padding to the top.
Okay.
That's going to push everything back down.
Oh.
Okay, so now we're making progress, but we've got one more problem going on. If we look at the cover image, there's a lot more over here that's getting cut off. And so what we can do is we're going to just do a search for CSS background sizing. And we're going to get all kinds of options here. And if we click on one of them, it's going to show you, like, if we do contain, it's going to have 2 of them. If we do contain no repeat, it's going to just size it to that. But if we do cover, it's going to, like, size the image up or down based off of what we want. So let's try and use that property. So I'm going to close out of here, and I'm going to say background dash size is going to be cover. And if we save that and refresh, now our image is sizing in better. And if we pull it over, you'll see it kind of sizes it up or down based off of the size of the window. So it's kind of doing what we want there, right? It's sizing it out
Right.
based off of that.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
that should get you in a really good spot for that.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions on that before I let Shantina get her computer back? So the only thing that we did there is we added a background image cover URL, a background dash size cover, and then we made sure that the padding was on the top of the bridge or the main section instead of adding margin to the bottom of the nav bar to push everything down. And that happens a lot, right? I'll be making a site and I'll go, oh, I just want to push that down, so let me put it in the nav bar. And I'm working on it and I'm working on it and I'm going, oh no, instead of pushing that down, I really wanted to push the padding up. And so you will frequently find yourself moving where your padding or margin is from one element to another to get the backgrounds to work as you want. Good work.
Thank you.
Max, I got a question.
Go ahead.
How do we make the icons line up? As far as
are they in span tags?
They are.
Great question. Could you copy and paste your code to me in a direct message in Slack and I can play around with it and get an answer back to you?
Okay, CSS too?
Yes, CSS and HTML.
Okay.
Just do them in two separate messages in Slack so it's easier for me to copy and paste it, and then I will play around with that and let you know.
Thank you.
It's a totally legitimate question. It's just one that I can't answer on the fly.
Hey Max.
Yep.
I'm having trouble with my text.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen.
I don't know what to do to make this move farther to the left here.
That would be as simple as if you've got your full width class working on your Netflix image, you could just make it a col 2 instead of a col 3. Are you saying, sorry, let me ask a question. You're trying to get this moved over here, or are you trying to get space between each of the words?
I don't know how to resize the text at all.
Okay.
I've tried 2 different things and it's not having any effect.
Okay, so what you want to be doing is, what I'm going to suggest, let me just take remote control, request. Okay, so one trick that you can do is if you grab your nostyle.css and kind of drag it over to the right, it will do a split screen with 2 different files. If you hate that, that's totally fine. But what we want to do is each one of these should be in their own span tags. So
I had it like that, but then it was stacking them all on top of each other.
So let me just do 2 of them and see what that does. Okay, so help if I could type. Okay. So that isn't stacking them, but what we are able to do now is if we add an ID on this called like cat links, over here, we can say, hey, on our cat links, we don't actually want to target this column. We want to target the span inside the column. And so if we just target the span here, now we can do a margin left of 5px and a margin right of 5px. And that should allow us to get our spacing going on. And then we could also, to your question, like if you wanted to adjust font size and make them huge, you could do 36px, and that would make them big.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So with the logo, I like the size it is, but when I shrink the column from like 3 to 2, it makes the logo shrink drastically.
So that's because you're using a width 75. If you mix them and go 100 here and then go down to 2 here, does that feel a little bit better? Or do you still like it wider?
I just don't want all the space in between the logo and the other links.
Yeah. So that did a little bit. That spacing to me feels more right.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know why it was.
I think it's because you were adjusting it down here, but then you maybe forgot that this width was set to 75 instead of 100.
Okay.
So you should be able to go on from there. I also wouldn't leave your font size at 36 for those links, but
yeah,
that should get you on to the next step.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right, Max, I'm going to share my screen because I want you to space help me do that in my code with the space the icons. And also I want my home button to be bold, and I've tried a few different things and it's not working.
Okay.
So I don't know what to do. I even tried to like underline it or italicize it and it didn't work. Hold on. Oh, there it goes. Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so for one thing at a time, what do you want to do first?
Okay, first I'd like to do the spacing in between my words at the
Okay.
top.
So what we're going to do is we need to target all of these span tags in here. But instead, well, you already have IDs on all of them, but we've got some problems going on. Like, you've got an opening span here, and then a closing span, and then another closing span going on here.
Oh yeah,
So,
that just did that when I kind of like an edit is.
so let me just, we're gonna request remote control request. Okay, so first things first, we want to clean up these.
Sorry about that.
And then the other thing we need to be careful of here is, like, you've got a col 4, but we have to be careful. This spacer call right now is in this div.
Oh.
So what we want to do is just take this spacer call and move it outside to here. And then your indentation is just a little off.
Okay. I was wondering because my image was kind of funky.
Okay, so that should help with that. Now, if we go back to your code, now what we want to do is we want to say we want to target all the span tags in here. So we're going to add an ID to this and call this cat links. And then in your style.css, so we've got red in here. And so we want to fix our red because before, if we don't fix it, anything we add is also not going to work. So, like, we don't have hashtags before the white because we're not using a hex color.
Yeah, I changed the color, so that was a simple mistake.
Cool. Okay, so now we're going to go down here and we're going to say, hey, target the, whoa, no, we're not. We're going to say target the cat links. And target the span tags inside the cat links. So we don't actually want to target this column. We want to target each one of these span tags inside that column. And so that's why we add the span. And then from in here, we can say margin on the left of 5px and margin on the right of 5px. And so now that got them spaced out.
Thank you. Okay, I got that under the spans and within, so I can add the little span ID to the in my CSS too, so I don't focus on that entire column. Okay.
So you good or you need more help?
I need help with making that home button bold since I've already created an ID for it. How do I make that just
so
bold?
Font weight is done by numbers where 400 is regular and then 700 is heavier.
I tried, it didn't work. So I tried to do the bold and change it to see if any of those would work, and it didn't.
Okay, so here you're trying to target home, but home when it's in the nav bar. And nav bar. Okay, so home is a class. I'm sorry, is an ID. So when it's an ID, we have to use the hashtag here.
Okay.
And now you've got it bold and italic and all of that. I wonder, can you actually do bold here? Oh, that is valid.
I looked under.
Okay.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you were fine with that. You were just missing that ID there.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anything else?
So if I wanted to do the rest of those, I'd just make these into IDs as well.
Yep, just make sure you're not breaking that rule. IDs are supposed to be unique. So home is fine to use as an ID because we're not reusing it. But because we're reusing the ID here, these should really all be classes. They shouldn't be IDs.
And that'll just be a period.
Correct, in your CSS. Now, it would work. It's just not fully valid HTML.
Okay, I see. All right, thank you.
Good progress. You're almost done with your nav bar. That's good. Believe it or not, you only have 2 minutes left of me live. Ariel had so much of me, she just had to go help another student. Couldn't take any more of me. Last chance for any questions. Larry, I have not forgotten your code. I promise I will I will send it to you tonight, and then I will also go over that in class tomorrow so we get a little playing with the alignment of things.
Okay, thanks, Max. I did have a question before we go.
Yeah, go for it.
So I paid attention to what you did with Shantina for the background image, so I got it to show.
Okay.
But before I had put anything in that row, it wasn't showing. And I put like hello, then it showed very small. So should I make it like a default size or give it a certain amount of padding?
Yeah, great question. You can the way I personally would approach it is I would get everything in except the background image, and then I would do the background image. And the reasoning for that is because all of the spacing and padding of that content is going to affect how the background image shows up. However, if you were someone who would work better if the image was in first and then you loaded up the content, what you could do is you could target that div or that row or whatever you have that background image in and do a min-height colon 300px. And what that's doing is it's saying, hey, we're not setting a static height. So if there's more content coming in here and that content pushes the height bigger, it still can do that. But the min height is going to say it can't go any smaller than 300 or whatever you do on your CSS.
Thank you.
Okay, last call for questions. Do we feel like we're making progress? Feel like tomorrow we may actually have a chance of getting most of this done?
Yes.
Could you imagine that you would be here 4 weeks ago?
No.
You guys are remaking one of the top 10 most visited sites on the internet. And you've got your header working, and you've got background images in, and you're making progress, and you're going to get through it. So we're going to spend more time on this tomorrow. I'm going to touch a little bit on media queries tomorrow, and also using Flexbox to get kind of things aligned the way we want them to and centered properly. So we will go through those, and then we will spend more time on this tomorrow and go from there.
Okay, Max, can I just bug you one quick second before we go?
You sure can. Ariel threw a good message in chat. Don't forget the feedback form. That's super helpful in me figuring out where we're headed out from there. There is that one homework assignment that is due tomorrow, so practice with your media queries in Free Code Camp. And other than that, you guys can head out, have an awesome night, and go ahead, Scadia.
Okay, so you see how my icons is popping up, they're going downwards now instead of the long way? I'm not sure. All I did was add the profile ID to my Cal 3 line, and it did that.
Okay, so what that's doing is that's applying what's in your profile icon in your CSS. Is there a width in there?
There is, and that okay, that will make a difference.
So yeah, what you're doing is you're overriding the column width, and you're saying I want that whole column to be 50 pixels. What you want to do, go back to your index.html. You don't want that whole column to be 50 pixels. You just want the image to be 50 pixels.
Okay, so I should take it out of here
and put it either on the IMG or the span tag. The IMG is probably the more correct place to put it.
Okay, so should I put it before or after?
Sorry. Anywhere in. So normally you do it after the source tag, but it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
But still inside the image. So you're not inside the image tag right now.
Gotcha.
There you go. And don't forget your quotes. And save and see what that does. Whoa. Okay, well, kind of fixed part of it. Let's go back to your index.html.
I think the word profile was spelled a little differently on her CSS.
Okay. So
Okay.
go check your style.css and make sure profile is spelled proflee. There you go. Save. And there you go.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions for tonight? All right. Keep at it. I promise, guys, this gets easier with practice. And it may be slow. You may not get it done tomorrow. That's all right. Just keep going, keep on. But when you're stuck somewhere, don't keep digging the hole deeper, right? It takes a lot more effort to fix it if you're dug way down deep and have several issues to fix. So when something goes wrong, when you notice your code highlighting is off, stop there. Don't keep going. Figure out why that broke. Figure out, hey, if I added a line of code here and it didn't do anything, why not? Right? Or, oh, that's not lining up where I want it to go. Instead of pushing through and finishing out the rest of the column, let me get that column fixed and lined up and right, and then we'll go from there. So, practice, practice, practice. We will revisit this tomorrow, spend some more time on Flexbox, spend some time on media queries, and then we will go from there. All right. See you guys. Have an awesome night.
Good night. Thank you.